welcome to another season of Top Gear. I'm working my way back to fellow Jersey boy Bob Whittrack. Bob has been doing tape-to-digital transfers since 2006. The reason I'm interested in this stuff is that I've heard reel-to-reel tapes sound really, really good, but I just can't afford another expensive way to play my music. However, I can afford some digital downloads every now and then. So let's find out how Bob does it.
Hello, my name is Robert Whittrack, and I'm the owner of High Definition Tape Transfers. We do a lot of archival mastering of tape, very high resolution, up to quad DSD, DXD. We also do physical discs, but our biggest focus is high resolution downloads.
How many have you done so far?
Probably since 2006, maybe 6,000.
Wow.
So I've done a lot.
And how did it start out?
I really didn't like the way digital sounded. I'm still an audiophile. And I didn't like the way it sounded, and I bought a cheap, I think it was an M Audio 2496 unit, and I took a commercial tape and I made a transfer, and it sounded really pretty good. I was kind of surprised, So I just kept on, building and building and building, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. So A to D transfers from the record labels were apparently not so great. What have you discovered about getting the best sound off a tape?
One of the biggest things you could do is power conditioning. It is huge. And when people don't use power conditioning, it really puts a coloration. It has a very sharp sound when you get noise in there. And cabling is huge. Purist Audio made some custom cables from my ADC to the tape pre, and it made a huge difference too.
What other things have made a difference?
I use a Antelope Audio clock, no jitter practically, no jitter. And I've done A/B on that with and without the clock, and there's no comparison. The clock is just so much more analog sounding and more wide, more depth.
The most recent addition to your chain, which is the Merrill tapehead preamp,
Yes.
What's it good for?
I feel like Merrill's stuff is very, very neutral, very, very accurate. One thing I did want him to put in for mastering houses is a high frequency adjustment and inputs, like 3 inputs. And he came back with one that he did some of the fixes, and it just blew me away. It's a great piece of equipment. I did a lot of testing, and his stuff sounds what I want, because when I master, I want to hear what's on the tape. And I try to have a very neutral system. I use his amps too. And it comes, it's just very neutral. And I hear what I'm putting into it, and it's what I want.
No one really knows what's on the tape.
Mm-hmm.
Because, even the original recording engineer doesn't really know what's on the tape. He thinks he does. So I think a lot of audiophiles have this conception for mastering engineers: why don't they just give me what's on the tape?
It surprised me some audiophiles don't even get this, but it all depends what they're running that tape through. A lot of places are using electronics that are built in some of these decks from the 70s and 80s. And it's not good. So it's not just the tape, it's what the electronics are that you put it through. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And where do the tapes come from?
Tapes come from archival stuff that's really old. We get a lot of master tapes from labels that let us use it, and also some defunct labels we have. And we're actually working on getting some work parts, 1-inch deck, to do our own mixing. But my main business focus is hard to find, and a lot of archival stuff. I did a Klipsch project from the original master tapes from Paul Klipsch, and that was a job. Tapes were not stored properly. The tapes were, a lot of them warped, but we put it together. They were very happy with it, and it's a very good seller for me. It actually worked out really well.
Do you have a preference for DSD versus PCM? I notice you sell both.
Yeah. Well, there's two things I got to do. If the tape is in the greatest shape, I have to edit it. And when I edit it, I'll do it in DXD because you can't really edit in DSD. It's very minimal. I use a software called Preamp by Merging. It's very good with DSD, but if you're going to do some, like, let's say you have some gaps in tapes, which happens a lot with older tapes, you really can't fix them unless you convert it to PCM. Because there's no plugins or anything in DSD right now. I don't think there will be. So if I have a really good master tape, I will do it in pure DSD and put it out like that. If I have to do digital editing, which is probably around 70% of the time, I'll do it in DXD and then convert it to DSD. But I mentioned that on my site, what's pure DSD. And all around, I would say I favor the sound of DSD. DXD is not that far behind. DSD to me sounds a little bit more natural to me.
I'm not sure what I like better, although a friend of mine who's a recording engineer and an audiophile, he has Metric Halo, AD,
Yeah.
and he says when he compares the mic feed
Right.
to the PCM at 24.192, it sounds the same. So I sort of suspect that DSD sounds good, but is maybe not as accurate to the source.
I don't know if that's true, but DSD, I would say, does sound more analog. PCM, personally, I wouldn't tell anybody not to buy DXD because that's how good it sounds. I mean, it sounds very good.
When you talked about gaps in the tape, is that actual splices?
No, actually, some tapes, especially ones that don't have any back coating from the 50s, 60s, sometimes the way they're stored, they'll have a little bump and then it won't hit the head exactly, and it'll come up on there as on the digital as a gap. And that's when you have to fix it.
Do you ever have issues with just like the emulsion flaking, the magnetic coating flaking?
Well, I had sticky shed syndrome, which is on a lot of the old Ampex tapes, which I just ran into on a few master tapes, and I baked it. And this particular one, I don't know what happened, but I think somebody baked it wrong, and I put it on my Studer, and I put it on rewind, and it was just, the flakes were just flying up all over the place, and they were all over the place. Luckily, this has a library wind, so it could go slower, so that's what I did. But I had to clean the inside of the unit. I've dealt with some sticky back tapes that just stop a machine. There's they'll just stop, come to a grinding halt. I would say 80 to 90% of the time when I bake a tape, it works fairly well. It works good. You can get a good transfer off of it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's good.
Is that good? Did I do okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Great. I thought that was very informative. Hope you did also. One more stop to make. Steve Guttenberg wanted to know how LPs compare to reel-to-reel tapes in terms of sound quality. I thought Harry Weisfeld would be the perfect person to ask about that. Oh, and we invited our friend Merrill to join us to talk about his tapehead preamp. Here we are.
Let me know when.
Okay. Who are you?
Now that's a good question. Harry Weisfeld here, VPI. We are looking at the Ampex ATR 102, and what we did is we pulled out the cards. These are the normal amplification tape head cards. And we took Merrill's replacement and we put them right in there, and she comes right out, right into Merrill's unit. From there, we go into this Tascam 3000 where we're going to change the signal into 24.192 or double DSD. And this is
what's
my drink. Put that over here. There's level, there's equalization, there's balance. and it has a lot of gain, so it's very low noise, and it's very clean. So I think we should mount up a tape and see where we go. You let me get the glasses on, otherwise I can't see. This one here.
yeah.
Normally what I tape are these old RCAs and Columbias because they're getting old and they're getting very, very fragile.
So where did this come from?
This is from Chad, Acoustic Sounds.
And what's Chad's source for this?
He gets this right from the original master tape.
I'm really distracted by this album cover over here.
That's a great record, by the way. Phenomenal record. And this is called Ultra Tape.
What's ultra about it?
Well, it's supposed to be the low noise tapes, hopefully. It is low noise. It is. I've already listened to this thing many times. This has been to many shows, actually. It always has to be wound back because we always leave it with the tails out. This thing really moves tape. I've never had a machine that moves tape this fast.
Although moving it safely would be as big a concern as moving it fast.
Absolutely. Never broke a tape on this. I'm going to actually play a little bit first and see where the levels are because this tape can really, really jump with its dynamic range. So you have to be a little careful. This is digital. You can never go red.
You can, you just don't want to.
You just don't want to, right? I think we can give it a try. And this is really great because you could take it back like this.
You don't have to get the capstan or flywheel go in or anything?
It's already there.
All right, so while it's going, what do you think about tapes versus LPs?
It's so interesting because we actually took this tape with the record to the Montreal show, and we compared it on a Technics 1500 series machine. And most of the audience, they always say that the tape is a little better. It is. But we were pretty close. We were using a Lyra, I think it was an Etna, and we were using Moon equipment, and it was pretty close. Tape is hard to beat. You never have that crunch, like you know it's coming, and it's gonna not be right. Tape just goes right through it. It gets louder. It just gets louder. No problems with tracking error or any of that stuff. But we did good. Most
Although
people
you still
say
you do need to align the heads.
yes, you do.
So there are the tape head setup can be much like cartridge setup.
It is actually. It's a little bit easier with 2-track than 4-track. 4-track, you have really, really tiny heads. 2, at least you have a little bit of area to catch. But you really have to use one of those MRL tapes and set the levels and make sure everything is okay. Really important. And there's also equalization, which thank God this thing does the equalization.
Oh, okay.
If you use the Ampex ATR 102, it's set for NAB or IEC. It can't do both. This does both. So you just have to click a button.
NAB, that's just an EQ, like RIAA.
Yeah, it's just an EQ curve.
Mm-hmm.
This is 1957. This tape was $17 in 1957. That's a serious amount of money.
That's why when I was in college, I had a tape deck. I always felt the LPs sound better anyway, and the LP is $5 or $6 and the tape is 15, 16. Why would I buy a tape?
Well, that was the argument here because the tape is $450 and the LP is about $35. So,
wow,
huge difference.
So, where did all your tapes come from?
Well, these tapes, these things came from a collection. Bert White. Bert had all these tapes. This was done in 1971. From the Decca Record Company. It's the Answer May Scheherazade. It's Dolby Type A. So you need that other machine in this to decode these tapes.
Why did Bert White get rid of his tapes?
He was recording. in the 50s. I got these about 1985. So he was in his 80s, and he was not well. He was a really great guy, Bert. Really loved me. He loved food. The man loved food. He loved music and he loved food. Remember the Duntex, the really, really big ones? He had 4 in his room. And he would put a record on and he said, what do you think? I said, it sounds horrible. He said, watch this. And he goes to the Levinson cello palette. Mm-hmm. Goes, it's on again. What the hell did you do? I fixed it. He fixed it. You know, whatever was wrong with it, he knew what to listen for. He knew which frequencies needed to come up, which needed to come down. He was very astute at the recording business.
You buy tapes from Chad now.
Yes.
Any other ways to get tapes?
Yeah, actually, you can get them from overseas. This is MPS. I think this was Horkhouse. You can find them. They're really all over the place now. There's the Tape Project, which has very good tapes. If you come with me, Mark, there is some over here. This is the International Phonograph Ink. This is direct copy. Actually, this is one of my favorite tapes. This is from Polydor Horkhouse. This is an amazing recording. And then there's these. And these are Chad's. What is this? Is this Horkhouse? Yeah. But these master tapes, this is all done with the NAB.
And they stamped it stretched? Is that
Yeah.
because, don't use this? It's...
Well, no, this is because that's what they call Dolby.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
not that the tape stretched.
No, that's how they talk about it.
So when you got the Merrill, what kind of improvement was it over the Ampex
Over
electronics?
this, quieter, cleaner.
Hey, I gotta put my mask on.
Look who's here.
Hey.
So Merrill, now that was the part where he talks about how good your unit sounds, and now I can't use it.
Why is that? Oh,
You're talking.
sorry.
You got to stand somewhere else.
No. Should I,
Okay.
Should I go around?
Yeah, that's good. So just say here, hey Merrill, then I'll pan over to Merrill. He can wave.
Hey, Merrill.
Hey, Harry. Good to see you. Hello.
Wow, you guys are good actors. Say again, compared to the Ampex.
Compared to this, which is the Ampex unit, it is quieter, cleaner, faster, more dynamic. It's just better all around. The 24192 comes out very, very well, and it's pretty much indistinguishable from the tape, other than you lose a little bit of air. The DSD will give you the air, but then you can't do any modifications on it. There's no fixing the tape if you do it DSD.
Mm-hmm. So Merrill, how did you get into making a tape head preamp?
Well, actually, I wanted a trophy product. So talking to Jens about this, and I said, Jens, I want a trophy product. Let's design this.
What is a trophy?
Trophy, something to show off. Yeah. So, so the phono stage obviously.
And by the way, you can take your mic.
Oh, okay. So the
I keep mine on.
the phono stage was well received and everything else. Of course, I don't have a big name in the audio business, so I said I'll build a tape head preamp as a trophy piece. And that would get some attention, which it did. So some of the circuits were a little more interesting to build because the demands of the tape user. They want a lot of adjustments because on the original electronics, the EQs are quite far off. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they got a master tape from Universal, and the Universal machine was measured flat with all the test tapes and all that. When they got the production tape, and there's test tones in the beginning, they had a 6 dB adjustment that they had to do on their machine.
Oh, yeah.
And it's probably due to just the plain old age, or maybe in the old days they just didn't have tight tolerances when they built it. Today we can use 0.1%. Back then 1% was really expensive and hard to get hold of. So this is the Master. It's called the Master Tapehead Preamp. We have another one called the Master Trident because there's 3 inputs, and a lot of people own more than one machine, including Harry. But Harry plays with one at a time. And Bob White, who does the high definition tape transfers, he said, I must have a high frequency adjustment, high or low, because some of the older tapes, they lose the high frequency, and then some tapes are recorded a little hot. So that's designed into the Master because of him. But the demand is to have 4 of the frequency tone controls, one at 50, 100, 1K, and 10K. And that's a hard thing to do. So we're working on that for the next product, which would be called the Pro. And that is really meant for the recording studios. There's something called a tape bump. And the tape bump happens, let's say it happens at 80 hertz. Then there's a second bump at 160 at half the dB, and so on and so on. So people try to adjust for the first bump, but they get all these other.
And that's a frequency response.
It has to do with the resonance of the head. It's always in the low frequency, and it differs on every head. Part of the head bump is the inductance of the head, how big the gap is that picks up from the tape. So the smaller the gap, the higher the inductance. But the smaller the gap, the less noise. It's a much better head. But a lot of the playback machines, the tapehead preamps, couldn't handle the inductance or the capacitance, and they'd have roll-offs within the frequency response. So this is calculated such that the input can take just about any inductance all the way down to just above a record head, so about 50 millihenries. And it can take a capacitance, so long cables, up to about 300 picofarads. A cable runs, somewhere between 15 and 20 picofarads per foot, so that's a long cable.
So what is the frequency response?
One of the things that, you roll off the high frequency because you record it hot and then you play back, so you take away the tape hiss. So there's a roll off down there. So you want to talk about frequency response, you have to include that whole different curve. It's just like an RIA curve, it goes down. But this response, I measured it up to 50 kilohertz, and it's still fully functional with no issues at all. And it follows the curve without a problem. So, but if you go higher than that, you start to pick up the bias on the tape. So you don't want to go, much higher than that anyway. So that's one of the things that you have to limit that. And if you leave the bias on the tape and you don't roll that off, you start to overload your circuits at the high frequency, the RF, even though you can't hear it. So those are some of the other things there.
This is one hot tape.
So what speed is this tape?
15 IPS.
15. So is 15 considered the sweet spot? Because I know 30 IPS you lose bass, and 7.5 IPS you lose treble.
Right.
So is 15 IPS?
Seems to be really good. If you don't mind spending $400 or $500 for a tape, it's the sweet spot.
That's the sweet spot.
It's just very expensive now, tape.
You're kidding.
No, it's ridiculous. It's about $70 a roll. Yeah. And let's not even talk about nice reels. Spend $100 on a set of reels. And what about these things?
The caps.
Here are the old Revox ones.
Yeah.
$200-$300 on eBay.
I guess you gotta get them. Yeah. You should start, get somebody to manufacture them.
I know. It's amazing.
Yeah. You can do it for a lot less than that. Yeah. So Harry, which is your favorite deck? Your tape deck?
If I had to pick one for 2-track, for 4-track, the TIAC.
The TIAC. Yeah.
Absolutely. This does 4-track too, but the TIAC does it better.
Yeah.
I rewired the head recently. Mm-hmm. There's no room to work in there. It's like you're soldering with your eyes closed. You can't see what you're doing in there.
This is where you get somebody like Shyla with really good eyesight.
I've got the glasses on, and I've got the magnifier with me, and I'm looking in there. It's ridiculous.
So the other thing we did, Mark, was early on, because a lot of customers have the ATR, and all the studios have the ATR, the Ampex ATR. So I went and built these cards that you plug in directly in, and I had the whole circuit of that, but you plug in the card and it goes directly to the head without doing any wiring. I mean, other than the cards and the cable. So I had my tech build that.
Yeah, this is a pleasure.
Yeah, this is, yeah. With all the other tape decks, you actually have to physically go wire the head and so that, and or put in the switch.
So can I have a copy?
No.
Whatever you want.
We proceeded to have a drug-fueled rave before calling it a warp. I mean, rap. And no, I did not borrow his copy of the Hugh Masekela tape. Given the $450 price, taking a free copy might be considered grand larceny. So I put on Cobuzz in the car, waved goodbye, and smoothly sailed out of the VPI driveway. This is why I shouldn't have nice things.